Hi everyone. So before we jump into this, I should probably disclose my relationship with the Star Wars prequels. I kind of hate them. Okay, but I also kind of love them. I grew up with them, I'm very nostalgic for them, and even to this day there are several aspects of the prequels that I like. But they're not shot well. The absolute over-reliance on CGI makes them look aged and not real in the slightest. The dialogue sucks, the action sucks, but they're fun. Well, for the most part. Now, the point of this video is making a respectful rebuttal to this video by Rick Worley titled Why the Star Wars Reviews by Red Letter Media, Chris Stuckman, etc. are wrong about everything. Now, aside from being a mouthful, it's a title that grabs your attention. It's a title that sounds powerful and firm, but is it? Well, let's see. The video starts off with a bunch of old footage of a bunch of guys giving their opinions on something. I don't know if it's the Star Wars movie specifically, but it's some type of property.
I don't think the spirit of the Dylan songs is being portrayed in this, with this incredibly corny group behind it.
But it doesn't really matter. At the end of the clip, these guys are being told by a bystander,
"He's just doing what he wants to do, innit? You know, if you don't like it, surely cut out."
well, we're off to a terrible start. So I think that the argument being proposed here in preparation for what we're about to see is, don't like what you see? Don't watch it. You know, an argument packed with so much material and substance. For those of you out there with only 3 working brain cells, let me explain why this argument never has and never will hold up by making the exact same nonsensical argument in favor of critics. Don't like what the critics are saying? Don't watch their videos. There's also this really awful underlying sense that because you have an opinion on something or their work that's negative means that it's automatically a bad thing. Like me looking at this guy tell off these nasty critics, guys that are literally just giving their honest opinions, is supposed to give me some sense of satisfaction. This, my friends, is what I like to call toxic positivity. The belief that just because something is critical means that it has a negative connotation, or because of said negative connotation means that it's a bad thing, and you shouldn't say it. Oh, you don't like this art style and think it doesn't fit with the art style that's already been established? You're just a hater. You're just being toxic. Oh, shit. You simply don't like this new character that's been added to your game that you want fresh content in? Fuck no, be grateful. If I like it, you need to like it too.
I've discovered that most critics themselves are cinematically illiterate. They don't really know much about movies. They don't know the history, they don't know the technology, they don't know anything. So for them to try to analyze it, they're lost.
Is perhaps the most ignorant statement I've ever heard. Let me put this into the same term, but make it sound much worse. If you analyze my movie, you are wrong, because you're not the one holding the camera like me. Oh yes. Oh, hallelujah. Let's bring up one of the other most worst arguments I've ever heard that I kind of hear on a daily basis. You can't do any better! Look at this piece of artwork for me. Do you think it's ugly? Do you personally just not enjoy it? Do the proportions rub you the wrong way? Is something about the color off? Well, you can't do any better than that, so shut the fuck up. Oh, man. Oh, I'm saving the world.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is a psychological phenomenon named for professors Mike Dunning and Jay Kruger, in which the less a person knows about a subject, the more they feel that they're an expert. If a person is so ignorant that they're unable to conceptualize what they don't know, they believe they know everything. I think this explains almost all of the internet criticism about the prequels.
All of it? Like all of it? You don't think that a massive majority of people saying the CGI in a film looks bad is valid at all? You're saying that most people that dislike aspects of the prequels don't know a lot about them? Really? I grew up with these movies. Like I said before, I like these movies, but I'm not gonna say they're good. I guess I just don't know anything about them.
So many people hate the prequels, you say. Surely they must have some valid points. Well, no. Not really, no.
Oh, okay, alright. We can pack our bags, guys. No one has ever made a valid point against the prequels.
So why would you send Anakin on basically the most romantic mission ever, in which they have candlelight dinners?
And when I got to them, we went into aggressive negotiations. Thank you.
Aggressive negotiations, what's that?
You're posing the question of if he really watched the movie because he misremembered candles being in a random romantic scene? You know that when people watch movies and critique them, they typically write down notes, so some minor details can get lost in there. And no, I'm not defending him. It is technically a incorrect thing, but the term candlelit dinner could also be seen as like a figure of speech, a metaphor, because, you know, it's a romantic dinner. Acting like Chris Stuckman not remembering candles in a romantic dinner scene is supposed to be some W? Really? Okay, so Rick makes some pretty good points about Chris getting some other small nitpicky things wrong about the Phantom Menace, and then he makes this comment.
Can you imagine how much better of a scene it would have been if he had to wear an adult-sized helmet and it didn't fit and he had to try to see out of it? It would have been fun. It would have made the scene more entertaining if he actually had to try to fit into an adult helmet. But no, he has the convenient child-sized helmet just there for some reason.
This is really amazing though, because with all the bitching that people did about the kid-targeted humor in the prequels, like, does he honestly think people would have just loved like some slapstick sequence of Anakin's helmet falling off?
Okay, I haven't said anything overtly aggressive in this video once, but this type of speaking is fucking cringe. When people take words like complaining or criticizing and attempt to invalidate and or humiliate by using words like bitching instead, it carries this attitude of antagonism. And even worse, it makes it look like you're defending the haha funny poo-poo humor, which, if that's what you're doing, this is going to be a long video.
It's these various ideas that could have been in so many scenes to make them better that Lucas never thinks of.
I mean, Lucas came up with the idea of Star Wars, you know, but Chris Stuckman came up with the Anakin struggling with his helmet idea. So plainly we can see who the greater font of creativity is. You know, I don't understand why Lucas wasn't bringing these geniuses on as consultants.
It's subjective! Why are you being so passive-aggressive, man? It's subjective. What you think might be better may not be better for Chris Stuckman.
If you want to see a good conveyor belt scene, check out Minority Report. Oddly, they both have moments in which our hero gets his arm caught in something, and they both came out in 2002. And Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are friends. Connections?
So, no connection. What is the connection he's implying here?
It was a joke.
Is he implying that Lucas stole this idea?
Dude, it was a dumb little joke.
I mean, he does, however, miss the significance of Anakin's arm getting caught right before it gets cut off, of them becoming trapped in a machine, of the foreshadowing of him becoming more machine than man. He misses the fire and hell imagery throughout the scene, which foreshadows Mustafar and the lava.
So now here comes the other thing a lot of people do, where they only explain the good ideas that a movie subtly had while completely ignoring that said good ideas are in a movie where this happens. Is subtle foreshadowing of Anakin being a machine cool? Yes, it is. Is the imagery of hell in this factory in Mustafar cool? Yes, it is. But I gotta show you the little problem with this. All this stuff right here that's in the same movie. Yeah, my problem kind of lies with all this right here. If you give me a dog turd with the promise that there's a little piece of candy somewhere in there, that's not gonna make the entire dog turd good. Sure, that little piece of candy is pretty sweet, but it's still covered in shit. An idea on its own can be good. An idea on its own can be something cool, something subtle, something that hints that George Lucas does actually have something, you know, walking around in here. But you can't just have one idea that may have been pulled off good in the same movie that has countless problems.
Chris here misses that the factory is again reminiscent of the underworld in Metropolis that eats up workers to fuel the city above. He misses that Anakin getting swallowed by a machine and pulled along by a conveyor belt, or quotes from Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, which again is about the dehumanizing effect of the factory age and capitalism on workers. He misses that these are both parallels to THX 1138, which is in itself a commentary on the dehumanizing effects in consumer culture. He misses that that was also quoted in this movie's Camino sequences with the clones. So this is...
What does this shit have to do with anything? Okay, George Lucas used other ideas he had from other movies that inspired ideas in this one. Yeah, Okay? Attack of the Clones is a movie that ends with explosions and guys in white armor shooting robots for 15 minutes straight. Just because there's some vague imagery that was inspired by a movie with a more nuanced plot doesn't automatically make this plot nuanced as well. Oh, silly me. The last scene wasn't actually 15 minutes, it was 13 minutes. Pfft. Did I even watch this movie?
During this fight between Obi-Wan and Grievous, though, impressive though it might be, there is a horrifically bad close-up of Obi-Wan where he's just like, oh, I don't think so, and it zooms in on his eyes and it's all like off-center, and I'm like, what? Where did that come from? It was...
Did he really ask where it came from, though? Because if he did, he would have found out that the shots were an homage to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Or, I mean... You know, really, if he knew anything about movies to begin with, he would have seen that, because it's a really, really famous scene to reference.
Please explain to me what in all a random Western cliche has to do with a space sci-fi movie scene where a four-armed robot with black lung is fighting Ewan McGregor in the middle of a laser battle. It's this argument again, oh, it's a reference towards some random thing, so that means your view that it came out of nowhere and had no place in a scene and movie that otherwise had no homage to Westerns in any sense is invalid. Imagine watching something like Blade Runner 2049 and realizing how nuanced and slow-paced that movie was. And then out of nowhere, there's some weird close-up of two people's eyes like an old Western where it absolutely doesn't belong. You'd probably think, huh, that came out of nowhere. Just for someone to stand up in the theater, walk up to you and say,
actually, that's a homage to The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, so I think you are just watching this movie wrong.
I mean, this fucking guy hasn't ever seen a Sergio Leone movie.
Well, I have, Rick. So you can't pull that one with me, Rick.
Well, the other thing he could do is he could pull with his hand. He could sort of, pull it open, like the gunfighter. Yeah, like Clint would do. Sergio Leone could do it with Henry Fonda. We can do it with Yoda.
And on top of that, this particular reference is actually a really interesting vein of stuff to look into, because the movies are full of references to classic westerns.
Okay, that doesn't mean that all of these belong. Some vague idea of a cowboy wandering the desert can work, and it has worked in the Star Wars universe before, but a movie that has its own sense of cinematography and atmosphere, whipping out some fucking Zoolander on me in the middle of a lightsaber duel doesn't work. Rick then goes on to give us some examples of the way that these movies have vague references to westerns, but do you notice one thing about all these clips? They're all fucking slow-paced clips of an atmospheric shot and not a random eyeball close-up that comes out of nowhere. Why are we acting like completely still establishing shots of a landscape is at all comparable to a corny camera movement that comes out of nowhere in the middle of a fight scene? As a matter of fact, I disagree with Chris Duckman here. Every time I've watched this movie, that never really felt that out of place because the movie is already a fucking corn fest and I just never noticed it in the first place. But acting like I can't possibly comprehend why this man subjectively thinks this is ridiculous.
Looks like you two will have a lot to talk about. Come on, Lars.
Yeah, I sold that to a moisture farmer named Lars.
I'm all right.
Oh yeah, a guy being picked up while the other says come on is a reference to a western, okay. Rick proceeds to make the same exact point over and over again while being really condescending towards Chris Duckman and then starts being a grammar Nazi out of nowhere. No, I'm not kidding. That actually happens. That's where we are right now.
And Revenge of the Sith does feel largely resided over.
If something seems strange to them, they don't try to figure out, well, why isn't it the way they would have done it? They assume that that means that it's a mistake, that Lucas fucked up. He didn't do what they wanted him to do.
Well, what some may see as wrong, others may see as right, and vice versa. I've already made the argument of just because it's a reference doesn't make it profound, so I won't say that again, but that's the beauty of film, isn't it? Some people would do things in different ways according to their own tastes. Some people would interpret and watch things in different ways, and that's okay. You know what's not okay? Telling someone that they're wrong because they feel as if something doesn't belong within the tone and or universe that the film has set up. And you know what? That's actually really cool that a lot of aspects of these movies are inspired by westerns. I really like westerns, and I didn't even know or realize that. Maybe if I watched this movie now, every problem I had with them will be fixed. Nope, still sucks. He goes on to explain how people disliked the title of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, when it was first announced, and that they're wrong because it was based on things in the past, therefore it's somehow smart. I like the name personally because the real menace to everything in the prequels is someone lurking in the shadows and an enemy behind the scenes pulling the strings. Do the movies do a good job at conveying this? No, but it's a cool idea nonetheless. See, Rick? That's how you do it. You don't look at the idea of something in a film and say it's good just because it's an idea. You judge it based on how it was pulled off.
And as I watched this scene, I became aware of something that I've never noticed before. In fact, I've never heard anyone mention ever. Nearly every single shot in the pod race is from the right-hand perspective of the pods, and I would say about 80% of the shots are panning from left to right. Pan from left to right. 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 Left to right.
So like I watched this clip here several times to figure out if I was missing something, because he's apparently not aware of like some seriously basic filmmaking shit here. I mean, just to make a point, I took the following clips from the very first 2 videos I found when I searched for 180-degree rule.
The 180-degree rule refers to an imaginary straight line you draw between...
Oh my fucking god, dude. Shut the fuck up. This is like the meme you would see making fun of film students. Again, do I agree with Chris Stuckman here? No, not really, because the pod race is something I oddly kinda like in episode 1, but I'm not gonna sit here and say, actually, you subjectively thinking that the shots are stale is completely invalid because of a random camera lesson I learned in my film school class last week. If this 180-degree rule is this magnificent trump card, then please tell me why all the other racing or flying scenes in the Star Wars movies aren't shot in the exact same way. Fucking hell.
I'll use the chariot race in Ben-Hur as an example.
Oh my god, guys, is he referencing an old movie? Holy shit, that is insane.
And you know, I could keep going point by point through every stupid thing that these people say in these videos, but it's all the same. And there's just thousands more hours of it by other people on YouTube just repeating this stuff. You know, what the fuck is that all about? And these videos have millions of views. And anyway, you know, in the end, all these like self-appointed critics are just repeating one another.
A lot of these million-view online movie critics all have the same exact points on these movies. Huh, I wonder what that could mean. Of course, I'm not saying that because something is popular or frequent means it's objective or correct. I'm saying that if there is a widespread agreement on one thing, you might want to understand why. So by the grace of our Lord and Savior George Lucas, the video segues into its next part, finally dropping the Chris Stuckman hate boner and pointing that rock-hard, veiny thing right at Red Letter Media, another very popular movie review channel on YouTube. I'll go ahead and preface this again by saying I'm not exactly the biggest fan of Red Letter Media. I agree with some things they say, and sometimes they have some...
The movie dumb bearded white guys are protesting. The movie other dumb bearded white guys are white knighting.
Pretty terrible takes. Yeah, they're funny, but I don't really consume their content on a daily basis. I'm just throwing this out there in case some loser wants to pull the fanboy card. So for the first 5 fucking minutes, he just compares clips of Chris and Red Letter Media making similar or exact same critiques of the movie as if it's supposed to mean something. Like, yeah, a lot of people share the same opinions and critiques on a movie. Okay, Chris Stuckman and Red Letter aren't very similar, and these 2 reviews were released several years after each other, so I don't understand what I'm supposed to take away from this point. What, do you want them to go find something new to hate about this movie? Are people not allowed to think the same things that others think about the same movie? Oh wait, I know what this is. It's that really terrible mentality that the internet has where they think that just because something is said a lot means that it's invalid, like when people make fun of cancel culture just because people say it a lot and not because they actually think about it, or when a lot of people try to shit on Halo 3 just because they're tired of everyone saying it's the best Halo game. Some of you may not get that, but if you do, subscribe.
I want you to tell me who the main character of The Phantom Menace was.
But as you watch the movie, I challenge you to figure out who the main character of this movie is.
This movie is told primarily from the Jedi's point of view, but the story that's being told is essentially the story of Queen Amidala and her plight of having her planet blockaded. Because the central story is ultimately the Queen's dilemma. She is really ultimately the central character. When I originally wrote the screenplay for this episode, it was very much like it is now, which is that the story starts with Princess Leia and Darth Vader and sets up the premise of the movie, which is their stolen plans to a Death Star.
Actually, the original does the same thing, so if you have a problem with the lack of focus in this movie, then you're a hypocrite. You guys already know how much I f***ing hate this kind of argument point because it almost always falls flat on its face. Sure, this idea of a movie being focused on several different characters is present in both A New Hope and Phantom Menace. You have eyeballs, congratulations. But the difference is A New Hope is just a better movie in terms of every single aspect of its development. I don't agree with the argument that it's hard to know who the protagonist of Episode 1 is because I thought it was pretty clear that it was Anakin, but again, I see where these critics are coming from.
In A New Hope, most people would probably say that the protagonist is Luke since he gets the hero's journey and all of that. But just like Anakin, he isn't introduced until around half an hour into the movie.
In the original movie, it's fucking obvious. I don't care if it starts off with C-3PO and R2-D2 for the first 15 minutes. It is Luke from after then to the end. In Phantom Menace, it's about like 5 different characters from start to finish. If you don't feel that same way, that's fine, but don't sit here and try to tell me that my subjective experience is wrong because
the original movies didn't.
You can like whatever you want, but whether or not you enjoy them, the prequels that Lucas made are these astoundingly intricate pieces of work that reference everything from silent films to avant-garde cinema of the 60s. And so if you're like a Chris Stuckman or a Red Letter Media, and you think the reason you don't enjoy them is because you know more about movies than George Lucas does, I mean...
It just shows that he doesn't know what's happening in the scene.
Yeah.
Or with the characters.
Or doesn't care.
Amazing.
Or doesn't care what's really happening in the scene.
Right. Yeah.
When he's thinking about that specific bit, but not in the context of the overall movie. Like,
so what you're saying is George Lucas has a limited mental focus, a limited intelligence.
The thing is, I haven't seen my mother in 15 years. I don't remember what her favorite colors were, or what kind of flowers she would have even liked.
That's kind of depressing.
Anakin's arm getting caught right before it gets cut off, of them becoming trapped in a machine, of the foreshadowing of him becoming more machine than man. He misses the fire and hell imagery throughout the scene, which foreshadows Mustafar and the lava.
At this part, he tries to convey this idea that Red Letter Media's points on a movie are invalid because they made a shitty movie or something, because that makes sense. Okay, if I say that $1 million movie has bad CGI and then I go make an indie film with a limited budget that has bad CGI, does that mean my original assessment of the film was incorrect? If I go see one of those videos making fun of Marvel's CGI and I tell the person that made the video that they can't do any better, does that suddenly mean that the CGI is good? I don't think so, no.
I remember when the Phantom Menace Red Letter Media review first came out and started becoming a thing.
is this for something, or what is this?
Yes.
I can't think of anything clever to say.
And people would excitedly tell me about this much-watched video they found, and they would be like, the review is an hour long. Like, the length of the review was in and of itself this amazing proof of the video's quality and deep scholarship. You know, for one thing, I find it really sad that your average filmgoer seems to think that talking about a movie for an hour is an extraordinary amount of thought to put into a movie. I mean, these movies take hundreds of artists' years to create, and in the case of George Lucas and Star Wars, his Star Wars series took 3 decades of his life.
Wow, it's almost like a YouTube video is a YouTube video and not $1 million movie that has money going into its employees, costumes, music, set design, script, actors, special effects, sound design, etc. You do realize that the average movie review is like 10 to 20 minutes, right? If that. Typically when a video is long, that means there's a lot of things to talk about, and when people typically review movies, especially one that they're not passionate about, it makes perfect sense that it wouldn't be an hour long. Like, why is this even a point? Are you saying that you don't like how people are giving others credit because they're making long videos? Is this you subtly trying to flex that you making a several hour-long video is like, that it like wasn't that hard? I don't know what you're trying to say here.
They're not film critics. Their Star Wars reviews are just long rants filled with misinformation, no research, and they're targeted at an audience that needs jokes about killing hookers every few minutes to keep them awake.
You heard it here, folks. Did you think that one dead hooker joke from a video made over a decade ago was a little funny? Well, you're a fucking idiot.
People just want to watch this shit to have the same things repeated to them over and over again, like how you rock a baby to sleep.
No, Rick. People watch this shit for several different reasons, such as they like the content creator, they want to hear a different opinion, they want to see how someone else backs up their own opinion. As someone that tunes into movie reviewers fairly often, like Your Movie Sucks, I Hate Everything, or Ralph the Movie Maker, I'll just say that I don't f***ing watch them because I'm rubbing my hands together behind the computer screen and saying, I want them to say what I agree with, I just want to hear the same opinion. I watch them because of the reasons listed above.
And get stuckmanized, and get stuckmanized, and get stuckmanized, and get stuckmanized.
I mean, no. I mean, no. And this is a fundamental problem with what people think the role of film criticism should be. They don't want to be challenged or made to think. They think a good review is one that just agrees with what they already thought or predicts what they will think.
No, I think a good review is when someone backs up their opinions with solid points, something I've barely seen throughout this video.
As much as I rag on him, Chris Stuckman seems like he's probably a pretty nice guy, I guess. And I think that's a key to his popularity. If you're a certain kind of, basic bro, you look at this guy and think you could probably hang out with him. He just says everything you already think, and he likes everything you like. He hates the prequels you hate.
Oh my god, what the absolute are you talking about? Did you seriously just out yourself as one of those people that has relationships hinge on movie opinions? Ew.
I watch and read reviews to learn things and hear opinions I might not have thought of on my own. I already know what my opinion is, so I don't need somebody with a funny voice making jokes about killing hookers and repeating it back to me.
Dude, we just find the videos entertaining.
Such an incredibly well-made movie, but I can totally understand how anyone would watch this and say, I mean, it's good, but why does everyone say this is the best movie ever made? It's kind of boring. I can totally see people thinking that because it does not follow common story structure. It's not like a enthralling story, so to speak. And you really can't deny the importance and the impactfulness of this film. I'm gonna give Citizen Kane an A+.
Oh good, finally Orson Welles can rest in peace, Because the legacy of Citizen Kane wouldn't have been secure without us knowing what Chris Stuckman thought of it.
Will you shut up and let the dude fucking review Citizen Kane? You've spent this entire video flexing your worthless movie knowledge on old shit, so I don't understand why you think it's this hilarious joke that Chris likes this old movie. He even said,
I can totally understand how anyone would watch this and say, I mean, it's good, but why does everyone say this is the best movie ever made? It's kind of boring.
Which is what you should be saying, instead of making an hour-long video about why people are wrong because they don't see an obscure reference to an old western that has absolutely no bearing on the plot whatsoever.
Because in the whole thing, he gives no sign that he has any knowledge at all about the history of the film, the technique, why it was groundbreaking, or...
Now these are eyes that analyze movies.
Any idea at all of why it's so highly regarded.
Chris Stuckman is such a scrub. He has an opinion on a movie but doesn't understand why the movie was groundbreaking. If the movie isn't groundbreaking, it's shit.
Now, if you don't understand anything about movies, I'm not going to say that that's fine, because I don't think it's fine. I think that arts literacy is important, and it's a problem that it's something that's not taught in our culture. But I understand that not everybody is an expert on film history.
And I don't give a shit if you're an expert on film history. You're allowed to like or dislike a movie, TV show, video game based on your own subjective tastes, as long as you have something to back it up. I know this word has a lot of contention around it, but the only thing flashing on the back of my eyelids right now is the word pretentious. If you don't know history about films, that's bad, and you're not allowed to dislike a movie because of it. You like the movie because of things like the music and acting, and maybe you just like the fight scene in it. Well, you're an idiot because those points aren't smart enough for me.
There's this video by Patrick Willems that's one of the most egregious examples that I've seen of this. He spends 20 minutes basically to say that the camera moves less in the Star Wars episodes that Lucas directed, and then he makes a handful of superficial observations that are just factually incorrect.
The aerial battles are where the storytelling sticks the closest to that of the previous films. There are small additions like a crash zoom, and this is a minor thing, but it's also the first Star Wars movie to use a lightsaber as a light source.
In the beginning of the video, there's this segment where Patrick pretends that he's been holed up in this room researching Star Wars so much for this video, and that he's gone crazy and turned into a bearded hermit. But then at the end of the video, you find out the actual reason for there to be a bit about him growing a beard is that he's doing a commercial for the Dollar Shave Club. So, you know, that's what these videos are actually about. They have nothing to do with learning anything or understanding anything.
That's what a fucking bit is. Do you not know what a bit is? You know that people that have sponsors typically have some little thing revolving around it that loosely ties into the video for entertainment value, right? What, are the sponsor and subject of a video not allowed to be related? What are you talking about?
The thing is, if you want to learn about movies, everything I've pointed out so far about film montage and pure cinema and the techniques of visual communication George Lucas is using, you can find all that stuff for yourself online. You know, I remember being younger in pre-internet days, because I'm old, and I would read interviews with Lucas where he talked about his own student films and the films that inspired him, and I would wonder, like, what could those possibly be like? You know, they were these elusive, mysterious things. And now all this stuff is just here on the internet. A lot of it is free for you to watch anytime you want to, you know? If you're curious about 2187, you know, just go watch it. It's here on YouTube.
Yeah, he's right. Go watch it. Go watch it for free right now. You may like it, you may not, but just because you watched a piece of film history doesn't automatically mean that someone else's sense of humor and or negative opinion of a modern day movie is invalid.
This is why people talking about this stuff as though it's any kind of valid film criticism or analysis is so obnoxious to me.
Did you not say ever to yourself, well, maybe they had a point with this or with that?
The point is, it's like if you paint your house white, and somebody comes along, well, that should be a greenhouse. Well, fine, but I wanted to paint it white. I don't think there's anything wrong with painting it white. I don't think there's anything wrong with me for painting it white. Maybe it should be a greenhouse. But I didn't want it to be a greenhouse. I wanted it to be a White House.
Rick, do you not understand that this clip is literally a perfect example of why every point you've made is completely wrong?
You know, the thing is, George Lucas isn't an idiot. He made The Phantom Menace a kid's movie on purpose, and he knew what the older fans would say, and he knew that some of them would be disappointed. At the time, he said that, you know, the fans are gonna hate it. It's like a bingey movie. It was intentional to start out brighter and more innocent and then transition into a darker movie by Revenge of the Sith. That's the way Star Wars movies always have been. Older fans like to say that this isn't true, and then they wax nostalgic about the olden days when Star Wars was darker and more mature.
In the not-so-distant future on a planet called Earth, it's Underoos.
Star Wars Boba Fett is here. That means Darth Vader's always near. C-3PO is lots of style. And R2-D2 just makes me smile. Star Wars Underoos are here, yeah! Something!
Yeah, remember those serious adult times for Star Wars?
Life creates it. Makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the force around you.
It was intentional to start out brighter and more innocent and then transition into a darker movie by Revenge of the Sith. That's the way Star Wars movies always have been.
No, they haven't. Acting like A New Hope was as childish as Phantom Menace is just blatantly incorrect, as you would say. I don't remember off the top of my head one funny, silly, poopy joke from episode 4, like, at all. Like, yeah, some of the humor in it is a little old-fashioned, but it's never blatantly childish and slapstick like it is in Phantom Menace. But this entire point is probably void because I don't remember a specific 3-second scene from a 2-hour-long movie. Woe is me. He talks about how George Lucas says the movie was made for 12-year-olds, so if you say that a movie is too childish, then you're just clinging on to memories of being a kid. Even though there are countless movies made for children that don't feel too childish and also aren't a part of an overarching universe that has already established a specific tone.
Watching these prequels again and knowing about the changes they've made to the originals, Lucas has always had a tough time conveying emotion through his characters without just having them say what they feel. He loves when people scream, "No!" or when Padme goes next, "Anakin, you're breaking my heart!" He has this thing where he's like, I need people to say what they're feeling. Because you can never actually convey emotion without saying it. I think that's what he struggles the most with in his writing. He's afraid that people are not going to understand what he's trying to convey unless they say it directly to the audience.
Like almost everything that Chris Stuckman says, the conclusion he comes to is exactly the opposite of what George Lucas is actually doing. The dialogue feels redundant to people because it's not intended to be necessary. The film is meant to work 100% without it. This is also the problem people run into with the acting. People are so conditioned to watch movies that are filmed plays that they expect the dialogue to tell you what the characters are thinking. But in Star Wars, the scenes are edited carefully so that everything you need to know about the characters is there in their facial expressions, their body language.
Okay, just because I can see with my eyes that a character is sad doesn't mean that that emotion feels genuine or well acted. If I mute this clip of Padme crying, I can indeed tell that she is upset, but that doesn't mean it was a good performance. That's what Chris was saying when he made the point of George Lucas having a hard time conveying emotion without characters just saying what they're feeling, which I 100% agree with. A wise man once said, "Silence says 1,000 words." Something you should have stuck to, Rick.
Star Wars, the original Star Wars, is a pretty gritty film. And,
Star Wars Underoos are here, yeah!
you know, just all the death and violence and murder and betrayal, and they blow up a whole planet of people.
They do.
And then everything else is sort of cartoony crap.
Oh, okay, so because there was a silly ad for a movie means that the movie wasn't a certain tone? What the f are you talking about? So just because there are little toy action figures of Wolverine on store shelves means that Logan wasn't a mature movie? Just because there's childish or weird merchandise for Neon Genesis Evangelion means that the show isn't for adults? Really?
I've heard lots of adults saying the political discussions must be boring to kids, but I've never actually heard a kid say that they were bored by it.
Have you ever specifically asked a child that question? How would you even know? You know that your entire argument here is based off of like an assumption, right?
I could still tell who the bad guys were. You could tell when they were doing something that created a bad situation for the good guys. The political discussions weren't a barrier at all to children. They were just a barrier to adults who still had the taste of children.
Oh, you thought the Senate scenes were boring because you're an adult that knows your own tastes as opposed to a kid that goes, "I like that," to anything and everything he watches? You must be a fucking child.
You excited for episode 1?
It was better than all.
What do you think, Cole? With the white?
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I like that.
Aha! Mace Windu. Haha! Go, man, go! Haha! Oh, God. Clones!
So what did you think of the movie?
I loved it.
When I went to the Phantom Menace reissue in 2012, I sat in the theater in front of a 6-year-old that was patiently explaining the movie to his dad. I'm pretty sure his dad was already a Star Wars fan, but, you know, it was cute, so he let him. You know, when Darth Maul first appeared, the kid gasped, and then he whispered to his dad, he goes, "That's Darth Maul."
Wasn't this point about how kids think the political scenes are boring? Why are you showing clips of kids watching like literal action scenes instead of what this point was initially about? You know that children typically aren't able to convey their emotions verbally that well, right? And as an adult, you can tell whether a boring scene is boring or whether it matches up with the rest of the movie and flows with its tone. A kid will watch fucking literally anything, it doesn't matter.
And you realize that Darth Vader is this pathetic character. He's not this big, all-powerful monster.
Damn, I guess I'm not allowed to think Darth Vader is cool or scary anymore because George Lucas said that he's not. That sucks. For the next like 10 minutes, Rick just acts like his subjective points about the viewing order of the Star Wars films is fact because he feels that certain plot twists are more important than others. Who gives a f***? Watch the movies in whichever way you want to.
You go to make a movie and all you do is get criticized and people try to make decisions about what you're going to do before you do it. You know, it's not much fun and you can't experiment. You can't do anything. You have to do it a certain way.
Okay, but people don't dislike the prequels because they're experimental. They dislike them because their humor is stupid. The characters made entirely from CGI look bad. The plot points feel rushed. The script is unsubtle and the acting is terrible. You can't just say and do things in a vacuum and expect them to work based on ideas alone. There is such thing as ideas not being recognized. There is such thing as ideas working on paper but not working when brought to fruition. I admire the idea of making a trilogy that starts off lighthearted and borderline kid-friendly and progressively getting darker, but I think that George Lucas's idea of starting off innocent and kid-friendly differs from most people. So now, What is the lesson that you should take away from this video? You are allowed to dislike or like anything that you want to. If you have knowledge on old movie shit, that's cool. That's awesome. But just because a director or a writer had reasoning behind something, just because he thought of what he was going to do, just because he has these ideas, does not mean that these ideas are going to come to fruition. You are allowed to have any opinion on a movie you possibly want, but the important thing is that you have to back it up. One other thing that I feel like I need to address here, I understand that being an asshole can be like kind of a character for your channel, but when you're an asshole on top of little to none of your points being valid in the slightest, it looks kind of bad.